Freedom of Information Act. First order of business is new city council orientation. And we have a very special guest with us tonight from the Municipal Association, Mr. Charlie Barano. He's the field services manager, and we're glad to have him here. And I'm going to ask you to come up and let's get started.
Excellent, great.
Thanks for coming down.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, members of council. It is exceptional to be here in the new year with each of you. I'm sure that who are the new council members? So I know, great. I know that you probably some of you may have traveled or had family gatherings, and then wham, it's the new year and here we are. So I commend you for wanting to do this to kickstart the new year. So we're going to go for a little bit, but I really want to be informal. I don't like standing behind is there a clicker? I'm sorry. I don't like standing behind the lectern. If that's okay, Mr. Mayor.
Charlie, you can see we're kind of informal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I asked if I need to wear a coat, and I was told I'd be okay. So, but I tell you more of my experiences, a little bit about me. I've been a field service manager with you. Tonight we're going to go through a presentation. You know, you've been elected, now what? So real informal. I want you to ask me questions that you might have, ways that I can help you. We're going to go through some Robert's Rules of Order ideas, and then I think your attorney is going to cover some additional topics.
I'll do this while.
That's okay.
it's called technology.
Yeah.
Isn't it great?
I guess when it works.
There we go. All right. Forward and back.
Cool. We are working now. It's great. So a little bit about the Municipal Association first. Those of you that are new, this may be most helpful for you. And let me say, those of you that are newly elected should have gotten these. This is our handbook. And then this is our folder on all the new information. Did y'all get? Did you get that?
Nope, we've got that.
Okay, I apologize. All right.
I have them, I just haven't given them out.
Okay.
I was gonna do that tonight.
Okay, great. Well, so you're going to get those tonight. Do any of the seated members want any of this material?
I got mine.
I got mine. Okay. So, but you're going to get those materials, and I'm going to reference those through what I'm going to talk about. So that's why I wanted to make note that if any of the seated members that were here wanted those, I'd be glad to provide those. But some of the things that we do with the association, number one is our collection program. You didn't know that. We collect a number of taxes on behalf of the 271 cities and towns in the state. We believe that we can collect those as a pool better than you could individually collect those, and we teamed up to do that. So telecommunication taxes, insurance taxes, broker taxes. I'm not going to get into what those are, but just so you know, we collect those and remit those back to you. We provide advocacy and communication, lobbying. We lobby on your behalf, have a team of lobbyists. The state legislature goes into session next Tuesday, so we're gearing up for that and work to stay on top of that. Risk management services. So we basically offer insurance to cities and towns. Many decades ago, a number of cities and towns got together and realized that we could pool insurance or resources, pool funding better and save money by doing it. And you're members of both of our programs, the South Carolina Municipal Insurance Trust, which is workers' comp, and the South Carolina Municipal Risk Fund, which is liability. So all your property, your coverage for police officers. I just make note of this. I get this with newly elected officials many times. What is my liability? What is my personal liability? Can I be sued? Well, yes, you can be named in a lawsuit, but we provide elected officials liability coverage through SMRF. And so as long as you remain, and you're going to hear me use terms like staying in your lane, as long as you stay in your lane and listen to your administrator and your attorney, and don't do things that are outside of that lane, you should have insurance coverage when you potentially could be named. We also offer education, training, technical assistance, and that's what you're getting tonight. That's a little bit about the Municipal Association. We have all kinds of books and pamphlets. Hopefully you have received our emails. We have a number of newsletters. You can, if you're not receiving our email letters that come out, we send out, I think it's on Wednesday, news across the state. So if you may want to see what other cities and towns are doing, we send out a newsletter. On Fridays, we send out a legislative update. So you'll want to read that, see what's going on in the legislature. We have podcasts that you may want to listen to. If you really want to get into it, we track legislation at the state level, so you can go in and pull that up on our website and learn more about specific legislation. We mail out a monthly magazine called The Uptown. It's got a lot of good material in it. Coming up is the Municipal Elected Officials Institute. So those of you that are new, would encourage you to get involved in that. You have to take an A and B session at our meeting coming up in February. I believe it's offered February the 5th. So you would sign up for the A session, and then next February you would take the B session. During that year, you would also have to take 5 sessions that you could either go to your Council of Government office and listen online, or you could take those 5 courses online on demand at your leisure. So that's the Municipal Elected Officials Institute. There's in the folder that you'll get information on the MEO program in there. And then the Hometown Legislative Action Day is February the 4th. This is the brochure that's in that folder. That's when we bring you to Columbia, talk about the legislative challenges or goals for the year. We walk over to the State House, and you may be able to meet with your delegation there in Columbia. Our annual meeting this year is in Charleston, so I hope to see you all there. That is July the 15th through the 19th. If you're really interested to get a full day, for those of you that are new, you'll hear about this, but if you really want a full day with other newly elected officials across the state, we offer that on March the 4th, Wednesday, March the 4th, and that's 10 to 3 in Columbia. And so that would be about a 4 to 5 hour session with our staff. We would provide you lunch. You would get to network with other new elected officials from across the state. So any of you that are new and would want to do that, we'd encourage you to do that. Any questions? That was a quick overview of the association.
Charlie, real quickly.
Yeah.
It's a great program, and for us as elected officials, you meet local elected officials from across the Charleston County and state that are really helpful. So again, thank you for doing that.
Yeah. So again, this presentation, I know many of you may have been seated for a number of years, so this is geared towards the new folks, but it's a great refresher for everybody. There's a difference between running an election or running a campaign, getting elected, and then sitting on council. With an election, it's about you, the individual. Well, now there's 9 of you. So it's more about a team. And so those councils that learn that to be effective, it's a part of the team. And it's building consensus and working together. We see a lot of dysfunction, unfortunately, and when we see dysfunction, that's occurring when individuals refuse to work together. You're not going to get your way all the time, and so you've got to learn give and take, what's important, where do I have to stand, and respecting each other, each other's perception of your opinions is very important. And so I would encourage you to do your homework. I'm glad it speaks that y'all are having this meeting, that you care about doing your homework. Not being afraid to ask questions. And you're going to hear that term again, staying in your lane. There's certain things that council members should do. The administrator should do this. The council should do this. We talk about a lane. It's when you start getting out of that lane is when we see some of the dysfunction and the challenges that are occurring in our cities and towns. So now we're going to talk about the forms of government. In that newly elected packet, we put out a publication called The Forms of Government. So you'll be getting that. I'm not going to go into all, there are 3 forms. There's the mayor council form, the council form, and the city manager form of government. You operate under the council form. We tell folks, and it's the truth, all the forms work fine. For those of you that haven't met one of my coworkers, Scott Slatton, Scott describes the forms of government like this. You've got a Ford, a Chevrolet, and a Dodge. They all work fine. It's when the people start getting involved in driving that we have some challenges. And so, I would encourage you not to focus so much on the form of government. They all work fine. But again, you operate under the council form. That's the second most in the state. 99 of our municipalities operate under that. You can have 5, 7, or 9 council members. You have the 9. Sometimes you hear it called the weak mayor because it's community by elected body. There's no separation between the executive, the legislative, the council being the legislative, and the executive, the carrying out the day-to-day operations. Council can do all of that. Now, what you can do though is delegate that power, the executive or the administrative, the day-to-day operations, to an administrator. And that's what you have done in your code of ordinances. You have delegated those day-to-day operations to a town administrator. And so through that, your administration handles the budget, presents that budget to you annually. You elect a mayor pro tem. I don't know if y'all did that at your meeting.
It will happen at the end of January.
So after an election, you elect a mayor pro tem that serves in the absence of the mayor. A majority of council can call a special meeting or the mayor. And you as a body appoint your city attorney, your judge, your municipal clerk, and your administrator. Again, you as a body develop those municipal policies. As we said, you may, under state law, hire an administrator. You've done that. And by ordinance, by your code, you've defined the responsibilities that you want your administrator to have. You can develop departments, and that administrator oversees those departments. The mayor presides over meetings. That's not in state statute under the council form, but it is what we see, and you have it in your code where the mayor does preside. He acts on behalf of council, whether that be, as an official representation, ribbon cuttings, things like that. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge to be the mayor because the general public doesn't appreciate or understand the different forms of government. There's folks on the street that may think that the mayor has all the power possible. And under the council form, each of you is equal. And so always keep that in mind. The mayor, as I said, can call special meetings and appoint a temporary judge if necessary. Again, no formal authority under state law beyond serving as a council member. Performs administrative duties only if those that are assigned by the council. But again, you that sign the day-to-day operations to a town administrator. May have some informal authority as a leader of council, as a spokesperson. And sometimes you would see that the mayor would serve as a spokesperson. But again, that's one of the challenges that the mayor has to balance, because and each of you has to balance. It's tough to speak on behalf of council because each of you have different opinions. So it's a balancing act that the mayor, that role the mayor has. The chief administrative officer, the town administrator, again, is appointed by the council. It's the administrator's role to carry out the day-to-day operations. And under your role, the administrator, as I understand it, recommends department heads. You hire those individuals and make terminations based on discussions with your administration. here where we see, you know, some of the roles, and I talked about lanes, it's important, you know, you don't want to have such a strict policy where you're discouraging your council members from contacting department heads. But that's where we start seeing some of the things get out of lane when council members go directly to department heads. Particularly, a council member may get a complaint from a citizen, a need from Public Works, and it's really best to take those to your administrator and then let your administrator with the staff determine what level of need does that need to be done immediately. We have other assignments that we need to take care of first. The chain of command in the council form of government should go from council to the administrator and then to staff. We see some challenges across the state when folks get out of that chain of command. Not to say that you can't contact staff, but just realize how important it is for that chain of command to occur. Any questions there or comments?
Isn't that your probably the biggest example? It's a citizen contacts a council member about Public Works. Never happened to me.
I was guilty today.
Yeah, and it, you know, you
Right, Donnie?
could call about the police department. Again, you want to make sure that your administrator knows. Let the administrator, and then hold your administrator accountable. Make sure that he or she is contacting you back to say, this is our time frame, because you're in a tough spot. You want to be accountable to your citizen. You want to be able to tell the citizen, we're going to have that fixed by Monday, or you should see improvements. So it's all about communication and being a part of the team. So now, social media. Probably the number one question that I get on a day-to-day basis is social media. Social media is a blessing and a curse. Those of you that are new realize that you're now, if you're on social media, you're now an official, you're a public official. So while you have the freedom to say and do whatever you choose, if you post political posts, religious posts, negative posts, whatever you want to call it, that reflects on this body. So keep that in mind. Just realize now, and you know that it could impact the ability of you to get the job done for the town, for the city of Isle of Palms. How to respond to citizens on social media. First, it's very important that the city, the town, is on social media. You need to have a brand. You need to be driving that brand and that discussion. And it's important that you're monitoring social media, not necessarily you individually, but staff, because you need to know that information. There's good information. There's a lot of bad information. And so you've got to learn how to wade through all of that to get to the good. A lot of folks now are posting public requests on social media. There's a pothole here. There's a whatever here. The crime is up here. So it's important that staff have an understanding of some of those discussions. The challenge of you as an elected official is when to engage in those discussions and when not to engage in those discussions. Typically, we encourage the council to deflect those to staff, have staff or your town social media account respond to those things. Try to avoid debates, discussions on social media. If you're looking at a new policy, you may not want to post that it's my opinion that this is what we should do. You're welcoming a sensitive debate potentially on social media if you do that. So just be cautious. You have to use social media, not necessarily you as an individual, but as a town. You can't. It is the number one way that you will communicate with your citizens. We see that across the board, but you have to be cautious. There are times where what you post could become a public record. If more than a quorum of you start discussing on social media on the same chain, some would consider that a meeting. So just be aware of that. Any questions? Social media.
I have a elected official Facebook page that kind of started as a campaign page, and you can pretty seamlessly transform it into an elected official page.
Right.
I mostly just use it to push out a lot of the city's posts.
Right.
But occasionally use it, for explaining things. For example, when I was going to school zoning meetings, it's something of a representative of the
Right.
community. I found that people really appreciate that, and that they are looking for elected officials to respond to them on Facebook or to be able to contact them on Facebook. So I don't think it is necessarily a bad thing. I agree you have to sometimes be careful with it.
Right.
And maybe not get into heated discussions,
Right.
that kind of thing. But I think it can be more of a positive, and I would encourage other people to consider it if you feel comfortable
Yep.
on Facebook. And you can at least keep that separate if you have your own page and you don't really get in danger of having a forum
Right.
kind of situation like you might in one of our neighborhood groups.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Any other? But not that any of you would do this, but I just a few weeks ago got a call from another city, and a council member had said something derogatory about another council member. I mean, those situations cause dysfunction and will impact the ability of this group to get stuff done. So just avoid that at all costs, because it creates dysfunction. Effective meetings, and my goal is to be honest. I'm not trying to say that any of y'all do these things. I'm just telling you some of the things that we see across the state. Can't stress, spend time with that agenda before. The time to understand your agenda is not when the meeting starts. I worked with councils for 18 years, and I love my elected officials, but there were times where I know that they didn't open the packet until they got to the meeting. It's so critical that you spend some time. There could be things that are of conflict on the agenda. You want to know that ahead of time. You want to know when there's a conflict, when you're going to abstain. You want to ask questions of agenda items. You should have a pretty good understanding of what is on the agenda before you walk in to the meeting. If you arrive in the meeting and you're not aware of an item, that's when there's challenges. And so it's the responsibility of the administrator to ensure that everybody understands what's on the agenda, and we see a lot better functioning of council when that occurs. Arriving on time, we see a good bit of that, and again, I know it's hard. We all live very fast. I have 4 children. It's hard to be on time, but you've got these dedicated times. Try to be on time for these meetings. Don't use your phone during the meeting. I see this a lot. I get a lot of complaints. Well, council member is texting citizen in the public, and don't do those things. Again, those are the problems that cause dysfunction with councils across the state that we see. You can see there the council member texting under the dais. Just don't do that. Side conversations, and y'all are pretty separated up here, but if you have committee meetings or what at other areas, just try to don't have those side conversations, even with among yourselves with council members. People, we are all human. We can immediately think if 2 council members over here are having a conversation and it's something controversial, does your council member on the other side think you're talking about them? You gotta be try to be respectful of everybody in the room. Body language. Again, this is one of those honest meetings. You asked me to come, and I'm going to give you the real story of the things that we see. Body language can just destroy a public meeting. Be aware, sometimes when citizens come to the meeting, it's maybe the first time they've ever entered a public meeting room. It can be intimidating to come before you sometimes, so be respectful. I'll have another slide in a minute where, somebody was pointing the finger, don't point the finger, and, try to remain level tone of voice. And the mayor's got a tough role. I mean, it's his, he or she, whoever the chair is, to maintain that, and that tone level. And as I said, you're all equal. So everybody's equal, even the mayor. The mayor, I get these questions across the state. I'll get calls from mayors, well, I can't vote, or I can't make a motion. Well, you can. But as the mayor, he knows that if he wants to see something occur, if he makes a motion on that, it's controversial, that could hurt that item or hurt the decision. So he or she has to use that effectively. And so good chairs, good mayors, understand that they may want to use that very limitedly, if not at all. Written agenda. So you got to have a written agenda. I think your attorney is going to cover some freedom of information stuff as we go along further on, but you got to have a written agenda. Has to be posted now 24 hours in advance. Y'all are doing great. We're live on YouTube, so we're all for transparency, encouraging the participation of the public. Your agenda is your guide. It's how you conduct your business. And in your code of ordinances, there's a specific layout of how your agenda should look. Do get a number of questions across the state sometimes about this, how to set the agenda. As I understand, I think your administrator works to set your agendas. Things come through your committee, so I don't think that's an issue here. In some communities we see where council members express that they can't get items on the agenda. So just make sure that everybody's voice is getting heard when it comes to setting agendas.
Charlie, before you leave that point, would it be a good idea for whoever's elected chair for each committee to reach out to his committee members and say, is there anything you want on the agenda for the upcoming meeting?
Y'all make any feedback on that. I encourage as much communication as possible. So a comment like that, I would support that. I think that's great communication. But I'll admit to you that I do not have a lot of background in the committee structure. So I would defer to you.
And that usually happens. I do think that there are some that in the past have thought that the chair of a committee is the only member that could set an agenda or include items to the agenda, and the code doesn't really speak to that. Therefore, what I would typically do is communicate with the chair. I would develop a draft agenda based on the discussion that was had in the past meeting, or any items that we as staff need guidance from the committee on. And usually the chair will share that with the rest of the committee and say, please let me know if you want anything else included by next date, which is what I've been doing this week since there are no chairs elected yet. But yeah, certainly I think it's encouraged for all committee members to feel like they can include items that pertain to the business of the committee. We try to avoid having duplication of items. Recreation committee would look at recreation type related items and so on and so forth. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that every member has the ability to add an item to an agenda.
So a court ruling in Lampreys versus Saluda, the county of Saluda, and then it was ratified in the state law that changed how you can amend an agenda. So just wanted to point that out. If you want to add something to an agenda where there's just going to be a discussion, that is fine. But if you want to add something to the agenda where the vote is going to be a final vote, really that only needs to be something that is emergency. I think y'all get a newly elected packet, and this little slide is in there. So if it's a vote that this is the final vote. That only really needs to be an emergency, a weather-related situation. If you want to add something to the agenda and it's going to get in the future a second reading or a public input participation, then you can take first reading on that item, as long as it, again, in the future was going to get public notice and participation. So,
You're saying you can do that on the fly?
you could, and you could correct me if you want to, but you can add something to the agenda for discussion purposes. There's no vote taken. That's fine. You could add something to the agenda if it was first reading, and then as long as it's got another reading where the public will be notified of that reading, it is fine.
You could do that within the meeting itself, because we don't usually go by that.
Well, we typically, for ordinances, they are posted,
Right.
ahead of time. They are included on the agenda. But I think what you're saying is, because we have 2 readings of council, then you have first reading, and then the public will still have an opportunity to chime in.
Right.
And, before the city council takes final action.
I guess what I'm saying is, we don't usually add discussions or.
That's
And-
a
And
bad
that
policy.
happens.
And it, yeah,
Yeah,
you want to
that's-
avoid that. But there may be a reason, could be.
Somebody can find a reason for anything.
Right.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
not,
it-
it's
you
not
know,
encouraged,
Right.
and there have, I
Maybe we can
I
erase
remember
all
a
that.
handful of times when it was staff's, it was maybe our fault that something didn't make it to the agenda and it didn't require action, then the committee could take a vote to include for discussion.
And realize that for that item to pass, it would take a 2/3
2/3
vote.
vote.
So there's even another, but again, there may be something that you, and we're gonna get into the fact that ordinances have to be separated by 6 days. There may be something that occurs where the agenda went out, and I can't remember when you sent it out on Friday and then something occurred and over the weekend and you need, could happen.
But just the optics of voting on something that's not on the agenda sets a bad precedent. Then you always have, even though you have first reading, you have first reading ordinance doctrine. So,
We don't have to adopt that, right?
That's already, it's state statute. So I mean, you can, this is the reference that
Well, I
we put
understand
out
all that.
with, but no, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, I don't.
Rules of order. So, your code, you have adopted Roberts by reference. General Henry Robert, this is the 11th edition now, is over 700 pages long. So, this can be intimidating. I'll admit to you that I have never sat down and read the entire Roberts Rules of Order. Now, I have read a number of study guides, self-help guides, so I will not dare say that I'm a parliamentarian at all. In our newly elected official guide, we put out this little red book. You can find good little cheat sheets like this. There's some cheat sheet voting with the typical motions that are made. You can find those documents, and that may be of help.
We also included a cheat sheet, a 5-pager on your handbook.
Remember, you as a quorum is 5 folks. So, and that can be in any form. It could be at this meeting. It could be 5 of you on the telephone, 5 of you in a text chain, 5 of you on social media. So just realize I get that question from time to time. Council wants to gather so that we can just get everybody's opinion and get on the same page. Can we meet at a restaurant and have, you can, but it's a meeting and you've got to advertise that 24 hours in advance. And the public has got to be allowed to be able to come to that, if they so choose. So, keep that in mind, and I think your attorney's gonna.
I had a question about that.
Sure.
This always comes up. So what if you're, a small community, have limited restaurants, and 4 of us are out having dinner, and I walk in, and I gotta walk out?
You're at different tables, or as long as you're, I think you've got to use the term reasonable there. That would be reasonable that you're fine there.
And not talk city business.
Right,
That would go for a social gathering where there are
Right.
a large group of people.
right.
or-
There could be In the small town I worked in, a theatrical performance where the entire council was there. But again, it's when you intentionally come together to discuss city business.
I do wanna add that for the committees, that it applies the same.
Correct.
For the committee, you have two people would make a quorum of that committee.
So that would mean if we have a committee meeting of some sort, real property, for example, I should not attend real property if I'm not on that committee.
It's not advised, the city attorney can kind of speak to that a little bit, but it's usually not advised because it is a committee form of government, and let's say another person shows up, then you have a quorum of council.
And then you're participating in an unnoticed council meeting technically.
But then this has always been another question about this. The third or the fourth council member can come and sit, but not make any comment, not participate. Right? And that's what I've been told. But then if the fifth one comes, what's the difference? If those two don't sit together, they do not participate, or they do not comment on, or anything, or nod their head, or make any gesture whatsoever.
I think that it's more about the perception as well, and the optics of trying to influence the decision-making from that committee. Therefore, it's advised not to attend committee meetings where you're not a member.
Okay, that's fine, and I'm not, I'm just asking. I'm also a citizen, and a taxpayer, and a voter.
What we have done to try to facilitate that is posting audios of the meetings almost immediately after a meeting, so that if you're interested to know, what the committee discussed, then you have the ability to do so. We're starting next week live streaming all of the committee meetings as well as council and ways and means. So that should also facilitate. So it's really, I think, a personal decision at that point,
Right, I'm just trying to pin it in. I can come to the meeting.
Yeah, I can't tell you not to come.
Right.
I mean, you're my boss.
But on the same note, I've come to a meeting where I was the fifth person, or the fourth and fifth and came in, I get up and left, just for that general appearance.
Once they start talking about you, they always do.
One thing I want to add on that topic, so if two of you are on Public Works and you get a call about a burst pipe or a flood in someone's yard, this has happened in other municipalities, two of the three Public Works guys go to the scene and they sit there and talk to the property owner. So just be aware that that is technically a meeting that needs to be publicly noticed. So just simple little things that you don't think about to put you in a potential FOIA.
Right, so if you got three people on a committee,
Yes.
and two of them are in the same restaurant,
Don't talk about burst pipe.
don't talk about first pipe.
Don't talk about
Look, I'm
whatever.
right here.
So should we avoid that then?
I've always gone, as long as you're not talking about business, if you're on the same committee, I mean, Ryan, I've been on committees for several years, we just don't talk about it. There's other things to discuss. It comes naturally not to mention it.
And I would try to avoid those situations just for perception, because if somebody walks by and sees you talking intently, they can say, oh yeah, they were talking about, they were having,
Oh, we never talk about
they're having a meeting, and it would be a matter of he said, she said, whether or not, you violated FOIA or not.
I'm wasting enough time on that. Thank
One
you for
one more quick one though, we're living on a coast, we have a tendency sometimes to have storms.
Right.
And we have OPCOM meetings daily, sometimes multiple times a day. And we've had council members show up and all of a sudden we start having more council members than probably should be there. So we gotta be careful of that too. Agree or not?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that Charlie was talking earlier about that line between administration and handling the day-to-day, and when you, in a situation like that, when you have a lot of, council members kind of showing up, without you intending to influence, you do influence, you could influence decision-making, or it's better to let me inform you all after I've had my meetings with staff and we have developed a plan and know what we're gonna do, rather than, being at that meeting. The mayor being the spokesperson, he handles a lot of the media requests. Usually the mayor attends some of those meetings. But it's not, I would not advise for that to happen.
It seems to me it's logical for the mayor and the public safety chair to,
It depends on the situation.
Correct.
if it's a hurry.
It goes back to respect and to respecting each other and understanding the situation, working together. It does. We're going to kind of dive into a little bit more before we get into rules of order. Ordinances. Most of you probably have heard the term ordinance, but basically that is a law. So you're making a law. Takes 2 readings, separated by 6 days. I gave this presentation Monday and was asked why. I've heard that there's 3 readings, and in county government there's 3 readings. Some municipalities, I know I was just in North Augusta, they have 3 readings. Some municipalities choose to do 3 readings, but state law says 2 readings. There's a number of things in the state law that says you have to do certain things by ordinance, and so all these things that I've got listed: annexation, buying property, selling property, your budget, and some of those may have public hearing requirements, particularly like the budget, for example. You have to have a 15-day notice of a public hearing. A resolution is just a 1-vote expression of opinion of council. It can be written, cannot be written, doesn't have to be written. And again, it's a vote of council. Any questions there? I was trying to think if there's any other guide information, but moving on into rules of order. And as I said, I am not a parliamentarian, but I'm going to try to give y'all a quick and dirty rules of order. We give a much longer parliamentarian training, so I'd be happy to do that if that is of interest. Just going through some of your sections, it's important to remember that each council member should ensure that they've got the floor from the mayor, respecting each other, not talking out of order. So you have to be recognized by the mayor. Once the mayor then will address that individual by name, and so they'll have the floor, and we'll be able to speak.
How much time do you have? Because that last slide, I would really like to have that read to everybody, because that is so important.
Yeah. No member of council or member of the public shall speak at a council meeting until recognized by the mayor or presiding officer. Remarks shall be limited to the question or subject under consideration. Disrespectful or personal attacks shall not be permitted, and the chair may order that the person making such remarks be removed from the council chambers. I've got some more slides coming up on public. This was more geared towards you.
I don't want to hold you back.
No.
That was really
It is, and we see a lot of dysfunction there.
Yes, sir.
With that. How often members can speak on an item being discussed? Typically, it's 2 times in Roberts. It's 2 times. I think you have in your code not more than 10 minutes. So again, it boils down to respecting each other's opinion, giving each other time to have the floor. Every motion, resolution, when offered or seconded, shall be, and this just talks about the order. So you have a motion, a second, then there has to be a consideration. If there's no second, then the motion dies, or it needs to be withdrawn, and the vote would occur there after the second and discussion. The manner of voting, and I don't know, do y'all do a roll call? I didn't ask you this question, or do y'all do the general raising?
Voice vote?
Yeah, so a voice vote or the raising of hands there. I think in your code you also have where you limit the explanation of a vote, so a member can gain the floor. I don't know if y'all use that a lot. That was rare that I had seen that. And I think your attorney's going to talk to you a little bit about ethics, but if you've got a conflict, again, you want to know that early on, because if you've got a conflict, we encourage you to leave the room. We encourage you not to be here with the discussion, a debate, not to vote. The reason for that, you fall back to that body language thing. If somebody has a conflict, you can still have the body language. Gets a little challenging, and you may smile at me when it gets into a quorum situation. There may be a circumstance where you have a conflict. However, if there's only 5 of you here and one of you leaves, then we no longer have a quorum. That individual with a conflict then may be encouraged to just sit there silently to keep the quorum. But that is a rare circumstance. But we have been discussing that.
Sorry, can't you just recuse yourself?
Again, if it's a conflict, we encourage you to leave the room just to show no involvement whatsoever. That's the easiest and cleanest way. I don't know if you want to add anything to the comment, but you can, but we think that you need to leave the room.
Can one council person ask another council person to recuse themselves?
Yeah, no, we discourage that. It is not an individual council member's place to point out another's conflict of interest, because that individual, you could be getting into some tough waters there. So we discourage that. Those, I don't know if you want to make a point there.
It's a personal decision. I'm gonna give you all the basics of what you need to consider, prior to making that decision, but even I can't tell you need to recuse yourself. It's your own personal decision.
And that is why you want to have looked at your agenda ahead of time. Because you don't want, Mr. Mayor, I may have or the attorney, I may have a conflict, I'm not sure. You want to have that conversation days in advance of the meeting. You want to know you're going to abstain or not. You can get an opinion from the Ethics Commission in advance that you could be involved or not. If you wait until after the vote, they're not going to give you an opinion. So that's why you want to have those discussions well in advance.
We actually have a recusal document that
Yeah.
we fill out.
And that was, well, I think you'll cover that, but if there is a conflict, yes, you have a form, and that form that goes into minutes. Interestingly enough, and I've seen this happen a lot, you're strongly encouraged to vote on a matter. Well, what if you don't vote? Then we have seen council members that do not vote. You can't be forced to vote. So if you make a decision, not because it's a conflict, you just don't vote. Just realize that creates even more potential confusion for counting the votes. You're here to represent the citizens, so I would encourage you to vote on every matter unless you have a true conflict. Ties, you are clear in your code, which is, we don't see this a lot, so I like this, where if there's a tie vote, the vote fails, and so that is good. Realize that the chair makes the decision on a ruling. However, you as the body of council can appeal that ruling. So know that. So I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible. Making a motion, so you would start out by making the motion. So a member makes the motion. A member seconds the motion. The chair, and you know, we may not see this as formal, but if it's very, the chair should restate the motion. If there's any terms or words that aren't clear, the chair may want to ensure that they know that. Then the debate occurs. The members then vote, and the chair announces the final vote and any next steps. So making that motion, again, if it gets challenging or it's a challenging motion, you may want to do that in writing. That's rare. To be honest with you, my 20 years, I haven't seen that done. You should wait to be recognized by the mayor or the chair. And so when a motion is poorly worded there, so if somebody makes a motion that's poorly worded, before the second can occur, there could be a discussion or the chair, the mayor could come back and say, would it be okay if we reword the motion this way? And as long as there's an agreement, that's fine, then it could go forward, and then it gets put on the floor, so there could be some tweaking of a poorly worded or a stated motion. So you can, as the mayor, help to clarify, but do that cautiously. And so, there's nothing wrong if you are very passionate about a topic, to have a conversation with the mayor before the meeting. Hey, I want to be the one to make the motion on this topic. There's nothing wrong with that. Get it on the floor as soon as you want to. So seconding the motion, a lot of confusion here. Folks will think, well, if they seconded the motion, that means they're in favor of it. Not necessarily. That means that they just want the item to be discussed. So a second doesn't necessarily mean that you're in favor of something. Some items, and I don't know if y'all use this, you see this, remember this, Roberts originally was intended for a church environment. So it's so thick because it's set up for conventions and really large meetings. Sometimes if a recommendation comes out of a committee, it doesn't require a second. So there would be no need to get the item on the floor to be discussed. And again, I mentioned the misunderstanding about the second. Just because you make the second doesn't necessarily mean that you're in favor of what is being discussed. So the chair, the mayor, formally places that item on the floor. That takes the ownership from those two members and puts it before the body. And then the chair, asks for the discussion. Typically, it's in Roberts, the individual that made the motion, so whoever made the first motion would be the one to speak first on the item. And then it's important that the mayor does a good job of allowing everybody to speak. You shouldn't speak a second time unless everybody has had an ability to speak on a motion. And again, it just encourages respect and fairness. Debate. Again, the maker of the motion, as I said, should be the first one. That individual, you shouldn't speak out against a motion that's been made, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to vote for it. So you could have been the one that made the motion, but ultimately out of the discussion, you decide to vote against it. That's fine. Anyone that's not spoken, as I said, make sure that they get to debate. Members should only speak twice, and that y'all got that codified. The mayor wants to keep the items that are being discussed germane. Sometimes the discussions can get off course. You want to really only focus on what is on the table to be discussed. Repeat the motion again when it gets very complex. This may be where you need to have it in writing. Ensure that you've handled any conflicts, abstentions, and then take the vote. Again, in your rules, a tie vote is a negative vote or a voted down. Things that may or may not have debate. So the chair could say, is there unanimous or general consent to approve the minutes? And so the chair could look and see or hear no dissent against the minutes, and the chair could say the minutes are hereby approved without taking official two votes. It's just ways to speed up or expedite the meeting.
Before you go further,
Yeah.
Historically, up until 2 years ago, we had our city administrator sitting next to the mayor, and Desiree, gracefully, on my asking her to move down there, because sitting up here, you don't see everybody clearly. And having her down there where she can see everything. I miss a lot of stuff. A lot of times motions get mixed up. So having her down there with the city attorney and Nicole has been, I think, a great improvement for our meetings.
Right. Yeah, in my 20 years, I always sat off the dais. I mean, I agree.
Old administrator used to sit up here, and newcomers will say, is she voting?
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I see it both ways, but I agree there's no right or wrong.
Very
We got a
helpful.
great relationship.
Yeah.
It's very helpful to look, to see sometimes y'all need any help or clarity or clarification on something, so, yeah, it's proven to be very helpful.
So again, you use this sparingly, but you can use general consent to help you to expedite a meeting. But again, when the mayor says, are there any objections to the general consent, if he hears one, then you've got to take a motion in a second. This is where I'm gonna go quickly because I'm seeing y'all kind of, I'm feeling body language. I don't know how deep you want me to get into this. This gets really deep. There's all kind of secondary motions and amending the motions. The secondary motions, you can have subsidiary, privileged, incidental. Those get, quite complex. And there's an order and which that you can do. Again, it all boils back to respect. This is where Roberts really gets complex. And as long as you are respecting, keeping the topic germane and being fair to your fellow members. But there are ways that you can add words to a motion, substitute. I'm gonna go. It's quicker to show you this kind of slide that we put together. So here's your main motion. So the motion on the floor is I move that we build a playground on the city property located on Smith Street. So somebody makes that motion. And then somebody says, well, I would like to amend that motion, make a motion to amend by inserting the word landscape before the word playground. So that would be your primary amendment. Then you can have a secondary amendment. The secondary amendment could be, I want to add the word insert police station. Well, if you're discussing this, hopefully your chair would go, that's out of order. We're talking about recreation, not a police station.
So getting realistic.
Yeah. So the mayor would hopefully rule that out of order. But you can have an amendment to the amendment, and again, this is where the attorney's over there going, oh my gosh, get me out of here. Because your attorney is your parliamentarian. I move to amend the amendment by inserting the word inclusive before the word landscape. So you could do this. And so you would insert that and vote on that. And finally, you get a motion to close debate, a procedural motion. So you vote that, and so it goes away like this. As I told you, there's kind of a pecking order in Roberts. So the motion to close debate is passed. Well, somebody doesn't like the word inclusive, so it fails. The primary amendment gets put in, and so at the end you get the landscape playground. I've never seen that complex of a discussion in my 20 years. But
I've never been to one of
hopefully, again, you're respecting each other, and you're making it through that.
And the amendments do require a vote as well.
Yes, the amendments require a vote. We do see the misuse of the term table. A lot of folks will say, I would like to table a motion. Well, you're putting it away. I mean, you're putting it away. So there's got to be a future motion to bring that off the table. The motion that you would probably want to make, if you want to delay that vote until the next meeting, you would want to make a motion to postpone instead of putting the item on the table. It goes on the table, really, staff or the mayor, whoever's putting the agenda together, they can't put that item back on the agenda because it's on the table. You would have to put a motion to bring off on the table on the agenda. So use the word postpone if you want to have it at the next meeting. A point of order, again, it's not a time to share your viewpoint. Use point of orders sparingly. But as I said earlier, the mayor can ask the parliamentarian for a view. The mayor can or may not, doesn't have to necessarily accept that. Then the mayor can rule, and then the council can come back and overrule the mayor. Appeal, and again, this is where the council would appeal the ruling of the mayor or the chair. Suspend the rules, we typically do not recommend that. An example would be a motion to suspend the rules. Let's say you don't allow comments from the public except during your public comment section, 3 minutes. Well, let's say your state legislator or senator walks in and says, I'd like a minute to make a few comments. I mean, you could make a suspension of the rules to allow something like that. Would be an example.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Sure.
A lot of we do that quite a bit. A lot of times, if our agendas are quite lengthy, we have somebody here that necessarily has another meeting they have to get to,
right, on
another level, and they're way down the agenda.
Right.
Many times we will suspend the rules to allow that
Yep.
to be heard.
Yep.
But it happens quite a bit. That's not a problem, right?
No.
Okay.
And that's usually because we have a lot of people sitting in the audience, and we want them not to have to listen to us all night.
Right.
Would it be best for them, they have, I think I've seen meetings where there's a motion to suspend the rules and do that, but there's also a motion to reorder the agenda.
Either way.
I think I think it would be appropriate for the motion to be to reorder the agenda to take on this item now, rather than to suspend the rules.
Yeah, that's the right language. You're correct.
I think that's fine.
That's what we got down there.
Well, I mean, what's also common is more in committee, when we have two people in the audience and they have pertinent knowledge
Right.
to whatever the topic is that we'll suspend to allow them to come talk with us.
We're going to get into public comments and discussion in a minute. Rescind means to repeal or nullify. Just remember, anything that you voted on by ordinance, 2 readings, takes 2 readings to repeal that. So keep that in mind. Reconsider. So there could be a motion to reconsider during the meeting. Let's say you have a motion at the beginning of the meeting, and additional information somehow comes in during the meeting. I don't know what that would be, but and that information that came in during the meeting changes some of your opinions. So the individual that voted in favor could bring a motion to reconsider if additional information came forth during the meeting. You typically only use reconsider during the meeting. Ballot votes, we don't encourage ballot votes. We do see them used. Realize that you can't have a secret ballot vote in our state under Freedom of Information. You could do a ballot vote, however, once it's over, that becomes a public record. So just remember, people, we see those ballots being used sometimes for appointments on planning commissions. They struggle with names. But just realize that it's still going to be a public document when you're done.
Yeah, they're upstairs. We had they used the ballot method to appoint committees on Tuesday.
Yeah.
First time in 67 years.
They're well versed on ballot voting.
Yeah. Well, so, hey. The next fun aspect sometimes can be public engagement. We see this good, done well, and we see it dysfunctional. Remember always that this is the city's meeting. This is a meeting to conduct the business of the city. And so you always have to maintain that order to get that business done. I'm encouraged that you, I think, adopted late last year a new ordinance that set it up in your public comment section. I think you did decrease that to 30 minutes and then 3 minutes per individual.
It was always 30 minutes.
Okay.
But we never adhered to it until this past year. And then we did make an amendment to make it 3 minutes maximum per speaker.
Yeah, and, I would encourage you to, always stay the course with your rules and procedures. The challenge, we all want to be, nice and friendly, and it's a small community, you know the folks in the room, you want to give everybody the opportunity, but we see it go downhill quickly, when you don't adhere to those rules, and then people start coming in and so then when you change your rules midstream so that the people that are causing problems, that you're not wanting to involve them, they think that you're trying to not allow them to be involved. So it's important that you follow your rules as you go. I saw, for example, it was in a meeting Monday, and it was a fairly new chair, and the chair saw an individual with their hand up during the meeting, and the chair was trying to be nice and said, "Sir, I'll go ahead. What did you have to say?" Well, guess what happened? Person over here raised their hand. Well, I want to make a comment. Well, and I'm sitting in the meeting, and somebody behind me, boy, is this now a public forum? So it's not that you're not trying to be nice or be fair. These are the rules. And it's the business of the community. So you've got to be strict on those rules. And so only let folks talk during that public comment section, during the public hearing, but beyond that, be strict.
We learned our lesson.
Yes.
This is around.
These are folks, it's their due process to speak. And the chair's got a tough job. There's a balancing act. Be prepared that people are going to use, the government is inept, or the government is corrupt, or you're going to hear that, and just just listen and remember that body language we talked about. Just sit there and listen. Now, if individuals start using profanity and that nature, that's when you probably have to take it to a next level. Maybe there's a warning that at some point, if it precipitates in having them removed from the meeting. You want to give folks a little bit of length there, but just listen.
And don't engage at all.
So the mayor's, I don't know if I've got that up there. So remember, with a public hearing, it is not the time to have a conversation. You as a council member, if you, during a public hearing, I feel that your comment, I'm telling you, you're on. So just be aware, you're here to listen. There's nothing wrong after the meeting that you go to that individual and try to get more information or ask. But remember that all the comments are to be directed to the chair. So really, if you even want to speak to that individual, you should say, Mr. Chair, Ms. Chair, Madam Mayor, Mr. Mayor, the only time there may be if it's a point of knowledge that individual would give, but avoid opinions at all costs. And we already talked about the body language. That hurts in public hearing. Some communities we're seeing now are using North Augusta. There's an image of, they have a scrolling clock that this bar, basically, as your 5 minutes count down, that bar moves. In Somerville, they've got a clock literally in front of you. And I've heard councils tell me, well, that looks tacky, or that's not. It's a rule, and it keeps order. I would encourage you to do it. If you've got a clock, use it. And stick to it. It keeps the dysfunction out of the room. It really does. Educate. So when you're having these public hearings, tell the citizens the rules. Make sure that you give them the rules in the beginning. North Augusta, for example, they put the rules you all probably distribute printed copies of your agenda. They put their rules on the back of the agenda. So that, because remember, citizens, many citizens, maybe their first time, they don't know the rules. They don't know what they can and can't do. So educate. Yeah, I've already mentioned that. The chair's got a tough job in some of these meetings. Questions. That was a lot. The rules of order is tough. It can be very dry. I was watching something and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm losing them. Questions on rules of order. Some of the, and I'm going to go through this quickly, and again, remember this is for new folks, but you got to adopt the budget annually. If you didn't know that. It has to have a notice for a public hearing in the paper 15 days in advance. Always have to have an annual audit. If you don't do those things, you will end up on the state's Revenue and Fiscal Affairs website. If you want to know who hasn't submitted an audit, it's out there. You want to avoid that. Those that don't submit audits, the state will begin withholding your money. So your local government money, your accommodation taxes. So that's the way that they penalize. You can only increase taxes based on Act 388 by the CPI plus growth. So you're limited there. You're limited on new fees. Your attorney would help you with that if you're interested in trying to find new revenues. State accommodation taxes is the 2 penny tax on lodging. Local, I think the county collects 2 and then y'all collect 1 here locally. Y'all do not have a hospitality tax. You do.
That's one we collect.
You 2 or
1.
1, okay. 1% hospitality tax. Those are tourism related taxes. You can only spend those for tourism related items.
It's 2, but that's the one we collect. It's 2%.
Okay. State accommodations, you have a accommodation tax advisory committee. There's all kind of rules and procedures on those. You have to submit an annual report to the tourism advisory committee with the state. So just be mindful of that, those that are new. Victims funds, so that's the percentage on the ticket that's to go to victim assistance type programs. I don't know if y'all have that in-house or you. So hopefully you're spending those dollars. We are seeing some dollars. You have to separate those out for victim services where communities are allowing those pockets of money to increase. We had one community where the state came in and said, you're not spending that money, so we're going to take it from you. So just be mindful of the victims assistance funds. You obviously hold funds in trust, so you're having to remit funds to the state. You have payroll deductions you submit to the IRS, just like any other business insurance premiums and the like. General fund, remember that anything that you want to do has got to be for a public purpose. There was a Supreme Court ruling for that, so keep that in mind. If one day you decide you want to increase your salaries as council, realize that has to be done by ordinance, cannot go into effect until after the next election. So keep that in mind. Your reimbursements, they need to be done. I know you don't have a policy paper. You submit back the expenditure to be reimbursed for that, for your travel. And I think your attorney may talk about some ethical situations there. You don't want to ever be involved with a state ethics investigation. I've had to do that for other elected officials. It's not fun. That was a good bit. I tried to give some real live stories and what I see out there. Any other comments, feedback, thoughts for me?
Really good. Very good information on your board. At least happen after every election. Excellent.
Yeah. So.
Yes, ma'am.
We have some sandwiches here, if you all would like to.
Would anybody like a snack real quick before our city attorney?
Or grab it?
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah, that's, if you could do the motion.
We have a motion to recess for second discussion. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous?
I guess I'm in favor.
Charlie, you from Greenwood?
Almost 20.
I make a motion to get the chairs. I make a motion to get the chairs.